The phone vibrated against my thigh like an angry hornet, interrupting my careful insertion of an four-line. I ignored it, focusing on the elderly patient's paper-thin skin. 3 more buzzes followed in rapid succession. "Almost done, Mr. Reynolds," I said, securing the line with practiced movements. My phone wouldn't shut up. 9 missed calls from Mason in the past hour. Whatever crisis my husband had manufactured this time would have to wait until I finished my rounds. I'm Elise, and I used to believe marriage was about partnership. That delusion shattered the moment Mason's business went under, taking his ego with it. These days, his crises arrive with the regularity of tax season, each one more urgent than the last. The phone buzzed again as I updated patient charts at the nurse's station. David, my colleague, raised an eyebrow. "Your better half having another meltdown? When isn't he?" I muttered, finally answering. "Mason, I'm at work. You need to come home. Now." His voice crackled with barely contained hysteria. "Mother fell. She needs full-time care, and you're the only one qualified." The pen in my hand snapped, leaving an ugly blue streak across Mr. Reynolds' chart. "Your mother lives 3 hours away." "What do you mean she fell?" "I brought her here. She's in our guest room." "You did what?" The words came out sharp enough to make David flinch. "Without discussing it with me first?" "There wasn't time. She needs a nurse, Elise." "You're a nurse. This is what you do. At the hospital. Where I get paid. Not as an unpaid caregiver for your mother who hates me." "She doesn't hate you." Mason's voice took on that condescending tone I'd grown to despise. "And money isn't an issue. You'll quit your job, of course." "Of course." Like I was some chess piece he could move at will. The familiar pressure built behind my eyes, the one that appeared the day Mason's business failed, and he started treating me like his personal emotional punching bag. "We'll discuss this when I get home," I said, keeping my voice level. "My shift ends at—" "No. You'll come now. Mother needs—" I hung up. David watched me with concern as I gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. "Everything okay?" "Mason brought his mother to live with us. Wants me to quit my job to take care of her." "Jesus," David whispered. "What are you going to do?" My phone lit up again, Mason's face filling the screen. I silenced it, a calm settling over me like the moment before a storm breaks. Finish my shift. Then go home and remind my husband that he married a nurse, not a servant. The phone kept lighting up, Mason's increasingly desperate messages filling the screen. Each one stripped away another layer of whatever love I still had for him. By the time my shift ended, I knew with crystal clarity that this wasn't just about his mother's fall. This was about control. And I was done being controlled. The house key felt heavier than usual in my hand. Through the front window, I could see Mason pacing, his shadow cutting sharp angles across our living room curtains. I counted to 10 before opening the door, steeling myself for the battle ahead. Finally, Mason's face was flushed, his tie askew. "Mother's been asking for you." "Has she?" I dropped my bag by the door. Funny, considering she hasn't spoken to me since last Christmas. "This isn't the time for your attitude." He grabbed my arm, steering me toward the guest room. "She's in pain." I jerked away from his grip. "Don't touch me like that." The guest room door was ajar, soft lamplight spilling into the hallway. Vivian Carter reclined against our best pillows, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. For someone who'd supposedly fallen, she looked remarkably put together. "Oh, there you are." Her voice dripped honey-coated venom. "I was beginning to think you didn't care about family emergencies." "What exactly is the emergency, Vivian?" I kept my distance, assessing her with my nurse's eye. No visible bruising. No splints or bandages. Just the same theatrical grimace she'd worn at our wedding when Mason chose my mother's cake over hers. I fell down the stairs. She touched her hip delicately. "The doctor said I need constant care." "Which doctor?" "Dr. Matthews." "And what hospital did you visit?" Mason stepped between us. "Why are you interrogating her?" "Because, Mason, I know every emergency room within 50 miles of your mother's house. There is no Dr. Matthews." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Vivian's face hardened, the mask of frailty slipping for just a moment. "Are you calling my mother a liar?" I'm saying that if she fell badly enough to need round-the-clock care, she'd have been admitted to a hospital. She'd have documentation. X-rays. A treatment plan. Vivian's eyes welled with tears. Mason, I told you she wouldn't understand. She's never understood what family means. No, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. I understand family perfectly. I understand manipulation when I see it. Mason's face darkened. Get out. Excuse me? If you can't support this family in its time of need, get out. Mother needs care, and you're a nurse. It's that simple. I looked between them, my husband and his mother, united in their delusion. The reality of my marriage crystallized in that moment. I wasn't Mason's wife. I was just another piece of property he thought he could control. You're right, I said, turning toward the door. It is that simple. Where are you going? Mason called after me. To pack a bag. Your mother can have the guest room. I'll take a hotel. The hotel room silence felt like a luxury after 3 days of Mason's constant calls. I sat cross-legged on the bed, sorting through our joint bank statements. Each page revealed another lie, another betrayal hidden in plain sight. Large withdrawals. Secret accounts. Credit card bills from restaurants I'd never visited. The truth of our marriage spread before me in columns of numbers and dates. My phone buzzed. Grace's name flashed on the screen, the first time Mason's sister had contacted me directly in years. He's destroying himself, she said without preamble. Mother's got him convinced you're abandoning the family. Funny how family only matters when they need something. I highlighted another suspicious withdrawal. Where was this concern when his business failed? That's what I'm trying to tell you. Grace's voice dropped. The business didn't fail. He was fired. Henry Moore caught him embezzling funds. The highlighter slipped from my fingers. What? Mother covered it up. Paid Henry to keep quiet. That's why Mason can't find work. He's blacklisted in the industry. The pieces clicked together. Mason's sudden interest in our finances, his insistence that I handle all our accounts, his desperate need for control. How long have you known? Since it happened. Grace paused. Mother's not really injured. She's running out of money from covering Mason's debts. They need my income. The laugh that escaped me held no humor. They need my nursing salary to keep their lies afloat. A key card beeped in the door. Mason stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. Hanging up now, Grace, I said quietly. You went through my private papers? He stalked toward me, scattering bank statements across the bed. Your private papers? In our joint filing cabinet? I stood my ground. Tell me about the embezzlement, Mason. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. Who told you? Does it matter? Were you ever going to tell me? Or just keep draining our accounts to pay back your mother? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You stole money. Your mother covered it up. And now you both want me to sacrifice my career to bail you out. I did it for us. His fist slammed into the wall beside my head. For our future. I didn't flinch. No, you did it for yourself. Just like everything else. If you leave me, you'll what? Steal more money? Let your mother fake another injury. I gathered the statements into a neat pile. I'm done, Mason. With the lies, the manipulation, all of it. His face crumpled, the mask of control finally shattering. Please, Elise. I need you. No. I walked past him toward the door. You need a nurse, remember? Go ask your mother. David found me in the hospital chapel during my break, staring at the stained glass without really seeing it. He sat beside me, close enough for comfort, but far enough to respect boundaries. Henry Moore called the hospital board, he said quietly. Mason's been showing up at their homes, demanding they fire you. My hands tightened around my paper coffee cup. Of course he has. Henry told them everything, the embezzlement, Vivian's cover-up. He's willing to testify if you need it. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I took a sip anyway, letting the bitter taste ground me. Did I ever tell you about our first date? David waited, understanding my need to process. Mason took me to this fancy restaurant. When the bill came, his card declined. He was so embarrassed, but I thought it was charming how he handled it, called his bank, made jokes about identity theft. I crushed the cup. Now I wonder if that was the first lie. The board's backing you completely, David said. But there's more. Grace sent these. He handed me a manila envelope. Inside were photos, Mason and Vivian at various restaurants with my former supervisor, the one who'd mysteriously pushed for my demotion last year. Dates stamped in the corner matched suspicious withdrawals from our account. They've been planning this for months, I whispered, trying to force me into private care work, where I'd be dependent on them. There's a position opening up at Memorial, David said carefully. Head nurse, emergency department. I recommended you. In Seattle? The possibility of escape tasted like freedom. 3,000 miles from Mason and his mother. My pager buzzed, a code blue in the cardiac unit. As I stood, David caught my arm. Whatever you decide, be careful. Mason came by my place last night, asking questions about us. He's unraveling. I thought of the Mason I'd married, ambitious, proud, seemingly strong. The man now stalking my colleagues and plotting my professional demise was a stranger wearing his face. I used to think revenge meant making him hurt like I hurt, I said, heading for the door. But maybe the best revenge is just living well. Without him. Elise. David's voice stopped me. The interview at Memorial is tomorrow morning. I booked you a flight. I didn't turn around. Couldn't let him see the tears threatening to fall. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Your patient in 204? It's Grace. She overdosed on sleeping pills. Mason's in the waiting room. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of timing. I straightened my scrubs, wiped my eyes, and stepped into the hallway. Time to face my husband, not as his wife, but as a nurse with a job to do. And after that, Seattle was calling. Grace's hospital room felt smaller with Mason looming in the doorway, a manila envelope clutched in his hands. The steady beep of her heart monitor provided a rhythm to the tension. Divorce papers? His voice cracked. You're serving me divorce papers while my sister's fighting for her life? I adjusted Grace's fore, keeping my movement steady despite the trembling in my chest. You brought your mother to our house without asking. You tried to sabotage my career. And now you're following me to work. What did you expect? I expected loyalty. He slapped the envelope against the wall. Everything I did for us. Grace stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Mason, stop. Stay out of this, he snapped. No. Grace's voice was weak but determined. Tell her about the trust fund. Mason went pale. Grace. Trust fund. I looked between them. Mother's conditions, Grace whispered. Mason only inherits if he's married with a stable family image. If you divorce him. Shut up. Mason's fist slammed into the wall, making the medical equipment rattle. The pieces clicked together, the sudden appearance of Vivian, the desperate attempts to control me, the financial manipulation. I wasn't his wife. I was his ticket to wealth. Security to room 204, I said quietly into my radio. You wouldn't dare. Mason stepped toward me, but Grace's monitor started screaming, her heart rate spiking. Get out, I ordered, moving to stabilize her. Now, this isn't over. He backed toward the door as footsteps thundered down the hall. You want a divorce? Fine, but I'll destroy everything you've built here first. Security arrived as he disappeared, but the damage was done. Grace grabbed my hand, her fingers cold and trembling. The overdose wasn't an accident, she whispered. I couldn't watch him become mother anymore. Couldn't let him do to you what she did to our father. My pager buzzed, the Memorial Hospital interview confirmation. In 12 hours, I could be on a plane to Seattle, leaving this nightmare behind. But Grace's monitors were still unstable, her grip on my hand desperate. I'll protect you, I promised, though I wasn't sure how. No. She released my hand. Go to Seattle. Save yourself. I enabled him too long. Let me fix this. Security returned with restraining order forms. As I signed them, I could hear Mason in the hallway, shouting about family loyalty and betrayal. But for the first time since this nightmare began, his words held no power over me. I had a plane to catch. And Mason? He could keep his trust fund, his manipulative mother, and his lies. I was done being anyone's puppet. The Seattle interview should have felt like triumph. Instead, I sat in Memorial Hospital's sterile conference room, my phone vibrating with increasingly frantic texts from David. Mason had snapped. "Your references are impressive," Dr. Chin said, sliding my portfolio across the table. "Though I'm concerned about the recent complaint filed against you." My stomach dropped. "Complaint?" She pulled out a letter, Vivian's elegant handwriting detailing accusations of patient neglect and professional misconduct. All lies, but crafted with just enough truth to seem plausible. "There's more." Dr. Chen's expression hardened. "Your current hospital reports you abandoned a critical patient mid-shift. Grace Carter." My phone buzzed again. David's message made my blood freeze. Grace coding. Mason blocking access to her advance directive. "Get back here. I need to go." I stood, knocking over my water glass. "Grace Carter is my sister-in-law. She's attempting suicide because—" "Mrs. Carter, please sit." Dr. Chen's voice was ice. "Your mother-in-law warned us you might try to dramatize the situation." The room spun. They'd planned this perfectly, trapping me 3,000 miles away while Grace's life hung in the balance. My phone lit up with a call from Henry Moore. "Mason's in my office," he said when I answered. "He's threatening to expose corporate secrets unless I retract my statement about the embezzlement. Says he'll take everyone down with him." "Put him on speaker." My voice sounded strange, distant. Dr. Chin watched disapprovingly as I gripped the phone. "Mason? Come home." His voice crackled with desperate triumph. "End this childish game. Grace needs her family united." "Family?" I laughed, a broken sound that made Dr. Chin flinch. "You and Vivian orchestrated Grace's breakdown. Used her life as leverage. Just like you used your father's death to control her all these years." Silence crackled across the line. "Then, how dare you? Grace told me everything before she took those pills. About how Vivian convinced your father not to seek treatment. How she used his life insurance to buy your loyalty. Tell me, Mason, how much is Grace's life worth in the trust fund calculations?" The line went dead. Dr. Chin stood, gathering her papers. "I think we're done here." My phone buzzed one final time, a message from David with a photo attached. Grace's advance directive, signed last week, naming me as her medical proxy. Her last act of defiance against her family's manipulation. "You're right," I told Dr. Chin, already heading for the door. "We are done. I have a patient who needs me." 3,000 miles stretched between me and Grace's hospital bed. Mason and Vivian had destroyed my chance at escape, but they'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't running away anymore. I was running toward the fight. And this time, I had truth as my weapon. Grace's hospital room had become a battlefield. Mason and Vivian flanked her bed like sentries, while David stood guard at the door, ready to call security. The advance directive trembled in my hands as I entered. "You're too late," Vivian said, her perfectly manicured nails stroking Grace's limp hand. "The doctors already have their orders." "From who?" I held up the directive. "Because Grace made her wishes very clear." Mason stepped forward, his face twisted. "That document's invalid." "Grace wasn't in her right mind." "Like your father wasn't in his right mind?" The words shot out before I could stop them. "When he wanted treatment, but Vivian convinced him to wait?" "Don't you dare," Vivian started, but Grace's monitor chirped, her heart rate rising. "She's responding to stress," I said, moving to check her vitals. "Step back." Mason grabbed my arm. "You're not her nurse anymore." "No." I jerked free. "I'm her medical proxy. And I have proof that you both knew about her depression for months. Used it to manipulate her, just like you used your father's illness to control the trust fund. Everything I did was for this family." Vivian's voice cracked. "Mason needed that money too." "To what, mother?" Grace's voice, weak but clear, silenced the room. Her eyes fluttered open, fixing on her brother. "To become father's replacement? Your perfect puppet." Mason staggered back as if struck. "Grace, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Grace's fingers found mine, squeezing weakly. "That's why I gave Elise the letters. All of them." The color drained from Vivian's face. "What letters?" "Father's medical records. The trust fund conditions. Your threats to cut me off if I told Mason the truth." Grace's voice strengthened with each word. I sent copies to Henry Moore yesterday. He's probably talking to the police right now. Mason lunged for the door, but David blocked his path. The police are already here, David said quietly. They have some questions about embezzlement. And coercion. And medical fraud. You can't prove anything, Vivian hissed, but her perfect mask was cracking. Actually, I said, we can. Grace recorded everything. She was protecting Mason from you, even while you were using her life as leverage. Mason turned to his sister, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. Grace. I'm sorry, Mason. Tears slid down Grace's cheeks. But mother's love isn't love. It's poison. And I couldn't watch her destroy you like she destroyed father. The police appeared in the doorway, and something in Mason finally broke. He looked at his mother, at Grace, at me, seeing at last the wreckage of his choices. I'll tell them everything, he whispered. Vivian's scream of rage was cut short by security's arrival. As they were led away, Grace's monitor settled into a steady rhythm. She was going to survive. And somehow, in trying to destroy us both, Mason and Vivian had set us free. The envelope arrived on my first day as Memorial Hospital's new head nurse. No return address, just my name in Vivian's unmistakable handwriting. Inside was a single photograph, Mason and Grace's children, their father's hands on their shoulders, Vivian nowhere in sight. I found Grace in the hospital garden during my lunch break, her recovery progress visible in her steady steps among the flowers. He took the plea deal, she said before I could speak. 2 years, with mandatory counseling. Mother's facing 5. The photograph felt heavy in my pocket. Did you know about this? She studied the old image, her fingers tracing her father's smile. He took it the day before Mother convinced him to skip his first chemotherapy appointment. Said he wanted one last picture where we looked like a real family. Why did she send it to me? Her last attempt at control, probably. Grace's laugh held no humor. Or maybe she finally realized what she destroyed. Hard to tell with Mother. David appeared at the garden entrance, holding up a stack of papers. The Seattle transfer documents, ready for my signature. A fresh start, 3,000 miles from the wreckage of manipulation and lies. You should go, Grace said, returning the photograph. You've earned your escape. It's not escape. I tucked the photo away. It's growth. Either way. She squeezed my hand. Thank you for showing me what real family looks like. Even if it took losing mine to understand. I watched her walk away, stronger with each step. The photograph seemed to burn in my pocket, a reminder that even the most picture-perfect families could hide the darkest truths. David waited patiently as I pulled out the transfer papers. The Seattle position promised everything I'd dreamed of: autonomy, respect, distance from the past. My pen hovered over the signature line. Having second thoughts? He asked. No. I set the pen down. Just realizing something. Running 3,000 miles won't heal what's broken here. And there are people who still need me. I thought of Grace, rebuilding her life piece by piece. Of Mason, facing his mother's poisonous influence in therapy. Even of Vivian, whose final attempt at manipulation had revealed more truth than she intended. Besides, I added, tearing the transfer papers in half, revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about staying, healing, and proving them wrong about everything they thought you were. David gathered the torn papers, a knowing smile on his face. So, head nurse position here is still open. Good. I stood, straightening my scrubs. Because I have some ideas about improving the family counseling program. The photograph stayed in my pocket, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, on your own terms, in the place they never thought you'd stay.